Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell moved quietly along the wall of the briefing room at Naval Station Norfolk, a silver coffee pot in each hand. The room was packed with officers, mostly men in their pressed uniforms, gold stripes gleaming on their sleeves. They barely glanced at her as she refilled their cups. "More coffee here," a captain called out, not even looking up from his papers. Sarah stepped forward and poured, her face calm and professional. She'd been doing this for 3 weeks now, ever since the incident. 3 weeks of serving coffee, filing papers, and being invisible to the same people who used to salute her. "Thank you, dear," the captain said absently, the way you might thank a waitress. Dear, Sarah's jaw tightened slightly, but she said nothing. Just 6 months ago, she'd been leading a Navy engineering team in the Pacific. She'd designed modifications to ship propulsion systems that saved the Navy millions. She'd commanded respect. Now she poured coffee. The briefing continued. Rear Admiral James Hawthorne stood at the front of the room, discussing fleet readiness. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s with steel-gray hair and a voice that commanded attention. Sarah had served under him years ago, before his promotion. "The infrastructure concerns are being addressed," the Admiral was saying. "We need innovative solutions, not the same old approaches that." "Sir, if I may," interrupted Commander Derek Paulson, a smug-looking officer in his early 40s. "I've reviewed the proposals, and frankly, none of them show real engineering insight. What we need is someone who understands naval systems from the ground up." Sarah's hand tightened on the coffee pot handle. Those proposals he was dismissing, 2 of them were hers. She'd submitted them anonymously through the proper channels, hoping her ideas might be judged on merit alone. "The committee will review all options," Admiral Hawthorne said diplomatically. "With respect, sir, this isn't a job for pencil pushers," Paulson continued. "We need combat-tested officers who have actually served at sea, not." He stopped himself, but his eyes flickered toward Sarah for just a moment. She knew what he'd almost said. Not someone like her. Not someone who'd been reassigned to administrative duties while under investigation. Not someone whose career was in ruins over a lie. Sarah finished her rounds and retreated to the back of the room. She stood against the wall, hands folded, eyes forward, invisible. But she wasn't always invisible. 4 months ago, Sarah had been serving aboard the USS Gettysburg as the assistant chief engineer. She'd been up for promotion to full commander. Her fitness reports were exceptional. Her crew respected her. Then Commander Derek Paulson came aboard as the new operations officer. He'd made his interest clear within the first week. Dinner invitations, compliments that lingered too long. Sarah had declined politely at first, then more firmly. She was professional, she was focused on her career, and she wasn't interested. Paulson didn't take rejection well. The accusation came 2 weeks later. Sarah had falsified maintenance reports to cover up her team's mistakes. Critical safety checks had been signed off without being completed. The evidence seemed damning, reports with her signature time-stamped when she'd supposedly been on duty. Sarah knew she hadn't signed those reports, but proving it was another matter. The Navy took the allegations seriously. They had to. Safety was paramount. While the investigation proceeded, Sarah was reassigned to shore duty at Norfolk, administrative work, making coffee, staying out of sight. The worst part wasn't the accusation itself. It was watching her crew, young sailors she'd mentored and trained, look at her with confusion and doubt. It was the whispers in the corridors. It was the way other officers suddenly had nothing to say to her. Only a few people stood by her. Her father, a retired Marine colonel, told her to keep her head up and trust the truth. Her best friend from the academy called every week. And her old mentor, Captain Patricia Rodriguez, now stationed in San Diego, sent her a simple message. "They're wrong about you, don't you dare give up." But truth felt like a fragile thing when the evidence was stacked against you. The briefing ended. Officers filed out, some leaving their empty cups on the table for her to collect. Sarah began gathering them, just another invisible woman in Navy utilities doing invisible work. Admiral Hawthorne remained behind, reviewing papers at the head of the table. He looked up as Sarah collected the cups near him. "Thank you," he said quietly. His eyes held hers for a moment, really looked at her, not through her. "Sir," she replied with a slight nod. She thought she saw something in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or was it just pity? She couldn't tell anymore. As Sarah carried the tray of cups toward the door, She heard Paulson's voice in the hallway outside, talking to another officer. The problem with letting just anyone into the academy these days, he was saying, is that some people simply aren't cut out for real leadership. They fold under pressure, cut corners. Sarah paused in the doorway, her back straight, tray balanced perfectly in her hands. She didn't turn around, didn't respond. Because that's what they wanted, a reaction, an outburst, proof that she was emotional and unstable. Instead, she walked down the hallway with her head high, those words burning in her chest. She'd spent 12 years proving herself in the Navy, 12 years of excellence, and one man's lie had reduced her to this. But Sarah Mitchell hadn't given up yet. Every night in her small apartment off base, she reviewed her own records. She looked for anything that might prove her innocence. She remembered that day, the day those reports were supposedly signed. She'd been in meetings all morning, then conducting training in the afternoon. Dozens of people had seen her. But the digital signatures said otherwise, and in the modern Navy, digital records were trusted absolutely. Unless someone knew how to fake them. Sarah wasn't just an engineer. She'd specialized in naval computer systems. She knew those systems could be compromised if someone had the access and the skill. Someone like Derek Paulson, who'd served in information warfare before transferring to operations. She couldn't prove it yet, but she was getting closer. As she washed the coffee cups in the small break room, Sarah made herself a promise. She would find the truth. She would clear her name. And when she did, everyone who'd looked through her like she was nothing would remember who she really was. The Investigation Services office at Norfolk occupied a nondescript building near the base's southern edge. Sarah had been there 4 times now for interviews, each one feeling more like an interrogation than a conversation. The investigator assigned to her case, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, was thorough but neutral, which meant he didn't seem inclined to look beyond the surface evidence. The digital audit trail is consistent, he'd told her during their last meeting. The signatures match your credentials. The timestamps align with your duty schedule. Unless you can provide concrete evidence that these records were falsified, my hands are tied. Sarah sat across from him now, a folder in her lap. It was Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after the briefing room incident. She'd spent every spare moment since then digging through technical manuals, access logs, and system protocols. "I want to talk about the signature authentication system," Sarah said. Webb sighed. He was a lean man in his 40s with tired eyes. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, we've been over this." "The system uses 2-factor authentication," Sarah continued calmly. "Physical CAC card plus PIN code. My card was in my possession on the dates in question. I have witnesses who can confirm that. Your card could have been briefly borrowed, or you could have given someone your PIN." "I would never compromise security that way, sir. You know that." Sarah leaned forward. "But there's another possibility. The system has an override function for administrators. Someone with the right access could generate authenticated signatures without the physical card." Webb's expression didn't change. "That would require information warfare clearance and admin-level access to the maintenance database. That's a very short list of people." "Commander Paulson has information warfare background," Sarah said quietly. "It's in his service record." "Commander Paulson is the one who discovered the falsified reports," Webb pointed out. "Why would he report something he himself had done?" "Because it gave him credibility, and it removed me from the ship." Sarah kept her voice level, professional. "Sir, I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to examine the system access logs for those dates. Look at who had admin access. Look at unusual login patterns." Webb studied her for a long moment. "Do you understand what you're suggesting? Accusing a superior officer of fabricating evidence is a serious allegation. Being falsely accused of falsifying safety records is also serious, sir." Something flickered in Webb's eyes. Respect, maybe, or at least acknowledgement that she had a point. "I'll review the access logs," he said finally. "But, Lieutenant Commander, if this goes nowhere, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that the investigation will conclude against you." Sarah's stomach tightened, but she nodded. "I understand, sir." As she left his office, she felt a mixture of hope and dread. She'd planted the seed. Now she had to wait and see if it would grow. The next morning, Sarah reported for her usual duties. More coffee, more filing, more being invisible. But something was different today. Admiral Hawthorne had requested her presence at a special meeting. not as coffee service, as an attendee. The message had come through official channels, brief and formal. LT, CMDR, Mitchell to attend infrastructure review meeting, 1400 hours. Sarah's heart raced as she dressed in her service uniform that afternoon, making sure every detail was perfect. She didn't know what this meant, but she wasn't about to waste the opportunity. The meeting room was smaller than the main briefing room, with a table for about a dozen people. When Sarah entered, she found Admiral Hawthorne already there, along with two captains she didn't know, and her breath caught, Captain Patricia Rodriguez. "Patty," Sarah said, forgetting protocol for a moment. Her old mentor smiled. "Good to see you, Sarah." "Captain Rodriguez flew in from San Diego at my request," Admiral Hawthorne said. "Please, Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, have a seat." Sarah sat, her mind racing. What was happening? "Gentlemen," the Admiral addressed the two captains, "this is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell. 5 years ago, she served under my command on the Ronald Reagan. She designed the propulsion efficiency modifications that are now standard on 12 ships in the Pacific Fleet. She saved the Navy approximately $18 million and reduced our carbon footprint significantly." The captains looked at Sarah with new interest. "Captain Rodriguez served with her more recently," Hawthorne continued. "Captain, would you share your assessment?" Rodriguez didn't hesitate. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell is the most talented naval engineer I've worked with in 23 years of service. She's also one of the most ethical officers I know. Her crew would follow her anywhere." Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion, but she kept her composure. "I'm aware of the ongoing investigation," Admiral Hawthorne said, looking directly at Sarah now. "I'm also aware that the evidence against you is entirely digital. No physical witnesses to wrongdoing, no pattern of past misconduct, just computer records that supposedly prove you signed off on work that wasn't completed." "Yes, sir," Sarah said quietly. "I don't make a habit of interfering with official investigations," the Admiral continued. "But I do make a habit of recognizing talent and defending good officers when I believe they're being treated unjustly." He paused. "I've asked Captain Rodriguez to review the technical aspects of your case. She has information warfare expertise that may be relevant." Rodriguez opened her laptop. "I've been going through the authentication protocols for the maintenance database. Sarah, you were right about the administrator override function, but there's something else you didn't know." Sarah leaned forward. "Every override generates a hidden log entry," Rodriguez explained. "It's buried deep in the system. Most people don't even know it exists. It was added 3 years ago after a security incident. I helped design the update." The room went completely silent. "I accessed those logs this morning with proper authorization," Rodriguez continued. "On the 3 dates when reports were supposedly signed by Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, there were override authentications. Someone with admin access generated her signature remotely." Sarah's heart was pounding now. "The IP address traces back to a terminal in the operations department aboard the Gettysburg," Rodriguez said. "The user account belongs to Commander Derek Paulson." One of the captains whistled low. The other shook his head in disgust. Admiral Hawthorne's expression was carved from stone. "Captain Rodriguez, I want a full technical report on my desk by 1800 hours today. Include every detail, every log entry, every piece of evidence." "Yes, sir." "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell," the Admiral turned to Sarah, "you will continue your current duties until this investigation is officially resolved. But I want you to know that I believe you, and I will personally ensure that justice is served." Sarah's eyes were burning, but she refused to cry. "Thank you, sir, thank you." After the meeting ended and the others had left, Captain Rodriguez pulled Sarah aside. "You did good work figuring this out," she said. "Most people would have just given up." "I couldn't give up," Sarah replied. "Not when I knew I was innocent." "That's what makes you a good officer." Rodriguez squeezed her shoulder. "This isn't over yet, though. Paulson has friends. The institutional Navy doesn't like admitting it made mistakes. Be prepared for pushback." "I will be." As Sarah walked back to her duties that afternoon, she felt lighter than she had in months. The truth was coming out. Evidence existed. But Rodriguez was right. This wasn't over. That evening, Sarah was leaving the base when she noticed Commander Paulson in the parking lot, walking toward his car. He saw her at the same moment. For a few seconds, They just looked at each other across the rows of vehicles. Then Paulson smiled, cold and calculated. "Lieutenant Commander," he called out. "Still playing coffee girl, I see." Sarah said nothing. She unlocked her car. "Must be hard," Paulson continued, walking closer. "Going from engineer to waitress. But that's what happens when people overreach, when they try to climb higher than they're capable of." Sarah turned to face him fully. "The truth has a way of coming out, Commander." Something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty, fear. "The truth," he said slowly, "is what the evidence shows, and the evidence is very clear." "Yes," Sarah agreed quietly, "it is." She got in her car and drove away, watching him in her rearview mirror. He stood there in the parking lot, and for the first time he didn't look quite so confident. The trap was closing, he just didn't know it yet. The official notification came on a Tuesday morning. Commander Derek Paulson was being placed on administrative leave pending investigation into allegations of evidence tampering and conduct unbecoming an officer. The news spread through Naval Station Norfolk like wildfire. Sarah heard about it while she was restocking supplies in the administrative office. Two ensigns were talking in hushed voices by the copy machine. "Did you hear about Commander Paulson?" "Yeah, something about falsifying records. Ironic, isn't it? He was the one who reported Mitchell for the same thing." "You think she really did it, or did he set her up?" Sarah kept her expression neutral as she worked, but inside her heart was soaring. The wheels of justice were finally turning. Lieutenant Commander Webb called her to his office that afternoon. When she arrived, she found him with a different expression than before, respect and maybe a touch of embarrassment. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell," he said, gesturing to a chair. "I owe you an apology. Captain Rodriguez's technical analysis is conclusive. Commander Paulson used his administrative access to generate false signatures in your name. We found evidence of 6 separate instances, including the 3 that formed the basis of the original complaint against you." Sarah sat down slowly, letting the words sink in. 6 instances. "He'd been testing the system," Webb explained. "The first 3 were minor reports, probably to see if anyone would notice. When no one did, he got bolder." He paused. "The question is why? What was his motive?" Sarah took a breath. "He asked me out, sir, multiple times. I declined. He didn't take it well." Webb's jaw tightened. "Did you report this at the time?" "No, sir. I thought I could handle it professionally. I didn't want to be seen as someone who couldn't deal with unwanted attention." Sarah met his eyes. "I know now that I should have reported it immediately." "Yes, you should have," Webb agreed. "But that doesn't excuse what he did, not even remotely." He pulled out a folder. "I need you to provide a complete statement about Paulson's behavior toward you, every instance you can remember with dates and witnesses if possible." Over the next hour, Sarah recounted everything. The dinner invitations, the comments about her appearance during duty hours, the time he'd cornered her in the supply room and told her she was making things harder than they needed to be. The subtle retaliation after her final rejection, being excluded from meetings, having her recommendations ignored, being undermined in front of her own crew. "Why didn't anyone else report this behavior?" Webb asked. "I don't know if they saw it as clearly as I did," Sarah said. "He was careful, never blatant, and he was a popular officer with the crew, charismatic, confident. When things started going wrong for me, I think most people just assumed I'd made mistakes." Webb looked disturbed. "This is going to go beyond a simple investigation now. This is harassment, abuse of authority, and criminal falsification of records. JAG is taking over the case." The Judge Advocate General's office meant lawyers, courts-martial, serious consequences. Sarah felt a grim satisfaction. "There's something else you should know," Webb continued. "We've started reviewing Paulson's entire service record. There was another female officer on his previous ship who was reassigned abruptly amid performance concerns. We're reaching out to her now." Sarah's stomach turned. "He did this before." "We don't know yet, but we're going to find out." As Sarah left Webb's office, she felt a complicated mixture of emotions. Vindication, yes. Relief that the truth was finally established. But also anger that it had taken so long, that the system had been so ready to believe the worst about her, that she'd had to fight so hard to prove her innocence. And underneath it all, a deep sadness for whoever else Paulson might have hurt. The next few days were a blur. Sarah was officially cleared of all charges. Her personnel file was corrected. She received formal apologies from the chain of command. But the biggest change came on Friday afternoon. She was called to Admiral Hawthorne's office. When she entered, she found not just the Admiral but also Captain Rodriguez and two other senior officers she didn't recognize. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell," Admiral Hawthorne said, "please sit down." Sarah sat, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. "First, I want to personally apologize on behalf of the Navy for what you've endured," the Admiral began. "The system failed you. We should have questioned the evidence more carefully. We should have considered your exemplary record. We didn't, and you paid the price for our failure." "Thank you, sir." "Second, I want you to know that Commander Paulson will be held fully accountable. He's facing a court-martial on multiple charges. If convicted, he'll be dishonorably discharged and will likely face prison time." Sarah nodded slowly. She felt no joy in Paulson's destruction, only a quiet sense that justice was being served. "Third," Admiral Hawthorne continued, "we need to discuss your career. You've lost 4 months of your professional development. You've been publicly humiliated. Your reputation has been damaged through no fault of your own." He paused. "What do you want, Lieutenant Commander? Where do you want to go from here?" It was the first time anyone in authority had asked her what she wanted. Sarah thought carefully before answering. "I want to go back to sea, sir. I want to do the work I was trained to do. I want to serve." "You've earned that and more," the Admiral said. "Captain Rodriguez has a proposal for you." Rodriguez leaned forward. "Sarah, I'm taking command of a new engineering initiative based out of San Diego. We're developing next-generation propulsion systems for the entire fleet. I want you as my deputy director. It's a promotion to full commander, and it's work that will define naval engineering for the next decade." Sarah's breath caught. Commander. A posting that would put her at the forefront of naval innovation, working with her mentor. She started, then stopped. "Sir, ma'am, I'm honored, truly, but I need to ask, is this real? Or is this the Navy trying to make up for what happened?" Admiral Hawthorne smiled slightly. "Lieutenant Commander, let me be clear. This position was created based on genuine operational need. Captain Rodriguez requested you specifically because you're the best person for the job. Yes, we're expediting your promotion timeline somewhat. Yes, we want to make things right, but make no mistake, this is a real job that requires real expertise. We're not offering you charity. We're offering you the career you've earned." Sarah looked at Captain Rodriguez, who nodded. "I wouldn't offer if I didn't think you could handle it. You know that." "Then I accept," Sarah said, her voice steady. "Thank you, sir. Thank you, Captain." "You'll transfer to San Diego in 6 weeks," Rodriguez said. "That gives you time to wrap things up here and take some leave. Lord knows you've earned it." As the meeting concluded and Sarah stood to leave, Admiral Hawthorne stopped her. "Lieutenant Commander, one more thing. There's going to be a briefing next Wednesday about the new infrastructure initiative. Every senior officer on this base will be there. I'd like you to present the technical overview." Sarah understood immediately. This was her chance to walk back into that briefing room, not as the invisible woman pouring coffee, but as the expert she'd always been. "I'll be ready, sir." That night, Sarah called her father to share the news. The retired Marine colonel listened quietly, then said simply, "I never doubted you, Sarah girl, not for 1 second." She called her academy friend, who whooped with joy and insisted they celebrate properly when Sarah got to California. And she sent a message to Captain Rodriguez. "Thank you for believing in me when no one else did." The reply came quickly. "I believed in you because you gave me reason to. Now come to San Diego and change the world." Sarah sat in her apartment that evening, looking out at the lights of Norfolk. 4 months ago, she'd been broken, humiliated, fighting just to prove her innocence. Now she was moving forward, moving up, carrying with her the hard-won knowledge that she could survive anything. But there was still one thing left to do. One moment she needed to experience before she could truly put this chapter behind her. Wednesday's briefing, walking back into that room with her head held high. She was ready. Wednesday morning dawned clear and cool. Sarah dressed in her service uniform with extra care, making sure every ribbon was perfectly placed, every crease sharp. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw not the woman who'd poured coffee and swallowed humiliation, but the officer she'd worked 12 years to become. Commander Sarah Mitchell. The promotion had come through officially 2 days ago. She arrived at the base early and went to the same briefing room where she'd spent weeks being invisible. It looked different now, or maybe she was seeing it differently. Same long table, same podium at the front, same chairs arranged in precise rows. But today, she wouldn't be standing against the wall. Admiral Hawthorne arrived shortly after, followed by Captain Rodriguez and other senior officers. The room gradually filled with the same people who'd watched Sarah serve their coffee. Some of them looked uncomfortable when they saw her. A few had the decency to look ashamed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Hawthorne called the room to order. "Thank you for attending. Today we're discussing the Navy's new Fleet Propulsion Innovation Initiative, a program that will modernize our engineering capabilities across all vessel classes." He paused, his eyes scanning the room. Many of you know Commander Sarah Mitchell, though perhaps not in her proper capacity. Commander Mitchell is one of the Navy's leading experts in naval engineering. She will be serving as Deputy Director of this initiative under Captain Rodriguez. "Commander, the floor is yours." Sarah stood and walked to the podium. For just a moment, she let her gaze sweep across the assembled officers. Some met her eyes, others looked away. She saw the empty seat where Derek Paulson should have been. He was in the brig now, awaiting his court-martial. "Good morning," Sarah began, her voice clear and confident. "The propulsion systems currently in use across our fleet were designed 15 to 20 years ago. They're reliable, but they're not optimal for modern operational demands. Over the next hour, I'm going to walk you through the technical specifications for the new hybrid electric systems we're developing." She pulled up the first slide. It showed efficiency curves, power distribution models, technical diagrams that represented hundreds of hours of her work. "These systems will reduce fuel consumption by 32% while increasing operational range by 40%. They'll also reduce our acoustic signature, making our vessels harder to detect. The modifications can be retrofitted to existing ships at approximately 60% of the cost of new construction." Sarah continued her presentation, fielding technical questions with ease. She was in her element now, discussing torque ratios and energy conversion efficiencies, explaining complex engineering concepts in terms that even non-technical officers could understand. Captain Jenkins, one of the officers she'd served coffee to, raised his hand. "Commander, this is impressive work. How long have you been developing these systems?" "About 3 years, sir," Sarah replied. "I started the initial research while serving in the Pacific. I continued refining the designs during—" She paused briefly, "during my recent time at Norfolk." The room was silent. Everyone knew what that pause meant. During the time she'd been falsely accused. During the time she'd been serving their coffee while they'd treated her like she was nobody. "The point is," Sarah continued, "innovation doesn't stop because of adversity. The Navy's mission continues regardless of individual circumstances." She saw Admiral Hawthorne nod slightly, a small smile on his face. The presentation lasted 90 minutes. When it concluded, there was a moment of silence, then genuine applause. Officers came up to ask more detailed questions, to request copies of the technical specifications, to congratulate her on the promotion. But the moment Sarah would remember happened as the room was clearing. She was gathering her materials when she noticed a young ensign hovering nearby, clearly wanting to speak but uncertain. Sarah recognized her, Ensign Lisa Chen, who'd served on the Gettysburg under Sarah's engineering team. "Ensign," Sarah prompted gently. "Ma'am, Chen's voice was shaky. "I owe you an apology. When everything happened, when they said you'd falsified those reports, I believed it. I didn't question it. I should have known better. You taught us to always verify, to never accept things at face value, and I didn't follow my own training." Sarah studied the young officer. She saw genuine remorse and something else, a lesson being learned the hard way. "Ensign Chen, do you know why we verify everything in engineering?" "Because lives depend on it, ma'am." "That's right. Lives depend on truth, on accuracy, on not accepting convenient lies." Sarah's voice was firm but not unkind. "You learned something important these past few months. You learned that institutional authority isn't always right. You learned that good people can be wrongly accused. And you learned that standing by your principles, even when it's uncomfortable, is what separates good officers from great ones." Chen nodded, blinking back tears. "I accept your apology," Sarah continued. "And I hope you'll remember this when you're a senior officer someday. When someone under your command is accused of something, look at the evidence carefully. Look at their record. Listen to their side of the story. Don't just accept the easy narrative. I will, ma'am, I promise. As Chen left, Captain Rodriguez approached. That was gracious of you. She's a good officer, Sarah replied. She'll be better now. You're going to be a fine leader in San Diego, Rodriguez said. Speaking of which, we need to discuss your team. I want you to handpick your engineers, find the best, regardless of where they're currently assigned. They spent the next hour in Rodriguez's temporary office, mapping out the structure of the new initiative. It was exciting, forward-looking work that would shape the Navy's future. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah had one final meeting with Lieutenant Commander Webb from Investigation Services. Commander Mitchell, he greeted her, I wanted to give you an update on the Paulson case. Please sit down. Webb settled into a chair. He's being charged with 6 counts of evidence falsification, conduct unbecoming, harassment, and abuse of authority. We also found evidence of similar behavior toward Lieutenant Jennifer Watkins on his previous ship. She's agreed to testify. Sarah felt sick. He destroyed her career too. Nearly, she left the Navy rather than fight it, but with your case providing a pattern of behavior, JAG thinks we can build a strong case. Webb paused. There's something else. Paulson's attorney approached us about a plea deal. What kind of deal? Resign his commission, accept an other than honorable discharge, pay restitution. No prison time, but his career ends and it's on his record forever. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Part of her wanted him prosecuted to the fullest extent. He'd tried to destroy her. He'd hurt other women. But another part of her was tired of fighting, tired of having her life defined by what he'd done. What do you think? She asked Webb. Honestly, a court-martial is unpredictable. We might get a conviction, we might not. A bad conduct discharge guarantees he's out of the Navy and carries significant stigma. He'll never work in defense or government again. And it saves Lieutenant Watkins from having to testify publicly about what happened to her. What does Lieutenant Watkins want? She said she'll support whatever you decide. You're the one who fought this all the way through. Sarah thought about Jennifer Watkins, who'd been through something similar and hadn't had the strength or support to fight back. She thought about Ensign Chen and all the other young officers who were watching how this played out, learning lessons about justice and accountability. No deal, Sarah said firmly. He goes to court-martial, not because I want revenge, but because the Navy needs to see that this behavior has serious consequences. Other women need to see that the system can work if you fight hard enough. And frankly, Paulson needs to face the full weight of what he's done. Webb nodded slowly. All right, I'll inform JAG. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right call. After Webb left, Sarah sat alone for a few minutes. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the accusation, the humiliation, the months of fighting for truth. She thought about the people who'd stood by her, her father, Captain Rodriguez, Admiral Hawthorne. And she thought about the people who'd looked through her like she was invisible, who'd been so ready to believe she was guilty. She wasn't bitter. Bitterness would only poison her own future. But she would remember. The following week, Sarah attended one final event at Norfolk before her transfer to San Diego. Admiral Hawthorne was hosting a reception for the new engineering initiative, and Sarah had been asked to say a few words. The reception hall was filled with officers, civilian engineers, and Navy leadership. Sarah stood at the podium in her dress uniform, the new commander's stripes gleaming. When I joined the Navy 12 years ago, she began, I believed that excellence would speak for itself, that if I worked hard enough, if I was skilled enough, if I followed the rules and served with integrity, my career would reflect that. She paused, looking out at the audience. I learned this year that excellence isn't always enough, that sometimes people will try to tear you down out of spite or ego or simple cruelty, that institutions, even good ones, can make terrible mistakes, that justice isn't automatic, it's something you have to fight for. The room was completely silent. But I also learned something else. I learned that truth is resilient, that good people exist at every level, willing to stand up for what's right, that the Navy I love, despite its flaws, is capable of correcting its mistakes and holding people accountable. Sarah's voice grew stronger. I learned that you can survive being underestimated, that you can endure humiliation and come out stronger, that serving coffee doesn't diminish who you are if you know your own worth. She saw several officers shift uncomfortably. Good, Let them be uncomfortable. Most importantly, I learned that leadership isn't about rank or position. It's about integrity. It's about standing up when it would be easier to stay silent. It's about fighting for truth even when the evidence seems stacked against you. Sarah looked directly at Admiral Hawthorne, who nodded slightly. Thank you to everyone who believed in me, who fought for me, who reminded me why I serve. And to those who didn't, thank you too. You taught me that I'm stronger than I knew. The applause was long and genuine. Later, as the reception wound down, Admiral Hawthorne approached her. That was quite a speech, Commander. I hope I didn't offend anyone too badly, sir. Oh, you definitely offended some people, the Admiral said with a slight smile. But they needed to be offended. Sometimes comfort is the enemy of growth. He extended his hand. It's been an honor serving with you, Commander Mitchell. San Diego is lucky to have you. Thank you, sir, for everything. As Sarah left the reception hall that evening and walked across the base one final time, she passed the briefing room where this had all started. The lights were off, the room empty. She could have kept walking, but instead she paused and stepped inside. Sarah stood in the darkness for a moment, remembering the weight of the coffee pots in her hands, the way officers had called her dear and looked through her, the humiliation of being invisible in a room full of people who should have known better. But she also remembered the strength she'd found, the determination that had carried her through, the support of people who'd believed in her when belief was hard. She thought about a quote her father had shared with her during the worst of it, from Theodore Roosevelt. The credit belongs to the woman who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. Sarah had been in the arena, she'd bled, she'd fought. And she'd won. She turned and walked out of the briefing room, leaving it behind for the last time. 3 days later, Commander Sarah Mitchell drove across the country to San Diego, to her new position, to the future she'd earned. Behind her, Derek Paulson's court-martial date was set. Behind her, the Navy was updating its protocols for investigating officers, adding safeguards to prevent what had happened to her from happening to others. Behind her, Ensign Chen and dozens of other young officers carried with them the lessons they'd learned about standing up for truth. And ahead of her, ahead was innovation, leadership, and the chance to shape the Navy's future. Sarah had served coffee in that briefing room, invisible and underestimated. But she'd never forgotten who she was. And when the Admiral had stood up straight and called her ma'am, when he'd recognized not just her rank but her worth, it hadn't changed who she was. It had simply revealed what had been there all along. Commander Sarah Mitchell drove west toward the setting sun, toward San Diego, toward tomorrow. She was done being invisible. She was done proving herself to people who'd never truly seen her. She was ready to lead.